Welcome to Writing the Wrong Way, where we talk about how writing works, how writers work, and how the best writers risk being strange. And I'm talking to Lyndon Radchenka today. And Lynn and I are having a kind of a freewheeling conversation that covers a lot of ground, but kind of focusing around goals and how to think about goals or think about your career, your writing career, your artistic career, in terms of planning, both in the short and long term. Talking to Lyndon Radchenka, who is a writer and does many things, and Lyndon and I are chatting about setting goals. And what better goal than to drink a beer at 11 a.m. Warm beer, probably, because mine are in the basement here.
I was gonna say, that's better than nothing, but I don't know that it's better than nothing. It's kind of
I got a Farmery beer, so this is a plug for Farmery, the
new sponsor
Manitoba,
of Writing the Wrong Way,
from Neepawa, Manitoba. Well, just for you, Lyndon, who is in Paris, and it's late in the day for him. Not Paris, sorry, you're in France.
Yeah.
Nothing like a warm beer at 11 a.m. Now, Lyndon, I wanted to talk to you about goals, making goals as a writer.
Yes.
So we're talking in October here, a little bit before Halloween. This episode will come out, though, just before the new year. And so I think it's something that's going to be on a lot of people's minds when this episode comes out. What am I going to do next year? What are my goals for the year, perhaps? Or even just how do you think about goals, or how should you think about goals as a writer in the context of having an artistic career? So I guess my question to you is just sort of, you're kind of living in France these days.
Yeah.
What are your kind of goals for just being out there?
For being out here. So just before I talk about that, I think it's important for the reader or for the listener who might not necessarily be super familiar with the publishing industry or being a professional writer is, Jonathan, could you take a minute to explain to the listener exactly how far ahead the publishing industry works?
Well, it depends what you're talking about when you say the publishing industry, and it also depends when. So right now, in a normal situation, so if we're assuming that we're talking about publishing, not self-publishing, okay?
Yes. Yeah, professional publishing.
So professional publishing, not self-publishing, but having a book accepted by a publisher who's going to then put the book out. So in a normal world, and right now it is not a normal world, which I'll get into in a minute, but in a normal world, it is you're generally looking at a lead period between sort of what you're doing now and what's if people think you're doing.
Exactly.
Let's say you're looking at about a 1 to 3 year window typically in there. So generally speaking, like if you sign a contract for a book to be published, so now you've done all of your work, you're about to move into maybe an editing process next. But when you sign that contract, let's say it's 2021 when you sign that contract, it would be fast if the book came out in 2022, 2023.
Yes.
It would 2023 is probably more normal in that scenario. Like you sign the contract to the book coming out, plan for that to be about 1 to 3 years typically. So it could be faster. I've had books come out faster, but that was literally because there just was like a slot that opened up. Like somebody got sick and couldn't finish their book, so they kind of put the book out earlier. And I've heard of books in a normal scenario where nothing goes wrong taking like 3, 4, 5 years to come out. And that's things go fine. So yeah, 1 to 3 years I think is a good rule of thumb. But that's a normal world, like I say. We're in the abnormal world now, not just because of COVID, but the kind of fallout of
Mhm,
COVID in the sense
mhm,
of supply chain. The supply chain, when we're talking here, and it won't be fixed by December when people hear this, but the supply chain is a nightmare.
mhm.
And that's for everything. So people were making all these conspiracy uh, theories about microchips, and vaccines, right?
Yeah.
And I would always say, like, I wish there was a microchip in the vaccine. That'd be, if I could get a microchip these days, how good it would great it'd be. Tesla can't get a microchip. If Elon Musk can't get a microchip,
Oh, because the chip shortage. Yeah.
he's building his own. And that chip shortage may not seem like a thing that's relevant to people in the book world, but
Yeah.
it is relevant, not because of microchips, but because everything is in that situation. Paper
Yeah.
is a big
Yeah.
issue. A lot of most papers made in China. China started shutting its factories down every 2 weeks. Never mind, I've been talking to publishers where they're literally have books like on a ship, going from
Hmm.
one place to another, and the ship
Hmm.
has been sitting there for 90 days, and
Hmm.
will sit there another 90 days, perhaps not being unloaded. It's
Yeah.
just a total nightmare in supply chain. So I would add like time to everything.
Yeah.
But in a normal world, yeah, it's slow. It's like 2 years is a good reasonable speed to expect
Yeah.
something to happen. If they say it'll happen, tomorrow, you wait
Yeah.
2 years.
Yeah. And I think that is one of the aspects of professional publishing that people don't necessarily realize until they're in it and dealing with it. They don't realize that, what you're working on now isn't necessarily going to be seen by the rest of the world for another 2 or 3 years. And I think some of the challenges in making plans are coming to grips with the extended timeline of getting something done, and also if you're working on something that you're going to be pitching out, coming to grips with the fact that your timeline essentially is going to depend on finding someone else who likes your work enough to produce it, like to find a publisher, to find an agent. You can't set a timeline on how long it will take you to do that necessarily. So I think there's a lot of challenges that come to the average writer when it comes to setting those sorts of goals.
Well, you've got quite a few good points kind of in there, and they're all clustered
Mhm.
around, I think, a really interesting point, which is that uh, to have a writing career, it really does require you to think in this long term,
Yeah.
and to make plans and goals like around a longer term. So as
Mhm.
you say, like, there's sort of two scenarios you bring up. So one is a scenario where you're producing a work. So I'm working on a book, say.
Yeah.
And as you say, like, when that's a whole project, but when that book's done, as you say, there's things that have to happen after that point,
Yes.
and those things take time. And if you're going a traditional publishing route, if you're going self-publishing, you can cut the time, but it may be unwise to cut the time, which I'll get into in a second. But if
Totally.
you're going a
Yeah.
traditional publishing route, let's just talk about that for the moment, because that's the thing that most people are less familiar with.
Mhm.
Um, in that traditional publishing route, as you say, just to get your book rejected could take you 9 months.
Yes.
And if you get it accepted, typically that will be a little faster.
But only
But
if you can find someone who's going to accept it first.
well, this is
What
the
are the
thing.
odds that the
You
first
don't
person you
know,
send it
right?
out to, yeah, is going to be the one who accepts it?
But even so, like, even if you have a really good line, like, it might be 6 months till you get it accepted, 3 months till
Yeah.
you get it accepted,
Yeah.
in a fast world.
Yeah.
And then once that's accepted, as you say, now you're playing the real waiting game, where it's like, well, when are they
Yes.
going to slot it out? At best, it'll be a year out from when you sign that contract, usually, and probably
Mhm.
it's going to be 2. But what that means, though, is a couple things. Let's say all goes well. You sign it, you finish the book, you sign the contract, you get a publisher, you sign a contract. Um, there's now 2 ways you have to think. You have to be today. I'm just using myself. I'll use you as an
Mhm.
example. Now you're today,
Sure.
Lyndon. And
Yeah.
today, Lyndon has to be figuring out what he's got to do next. And what you got to
Yeah.
do next is not work on this book, because you're just waiting around for something. You're waiting around for
Yeah.
edits back, let's say.
Yeah.
While you're waiting around for edits back, you better be doing something else, man.
Yeah.
You got to think about the next book
Yeah.
you're going to do after that, right? Now you're working
Yeah,
on
that
the book
actually,
after this book. So now you're like,
yeah,
now you're projecting 4 years ahead, maybe,
yeah,
right? Like what you're going to do then.
yeah.
So that's a whole goal setting process in many respects. But the other thing is, you got to also be like, 2023 Lyndon,
Hmm.
while you're 2021 Lyndon, you also have to be 2023 Lyndon, and you have to be thinking
Hmm.
about like, what would 2023 Lyndon wish that I had done today?
Yeah,
In terms of like, anything. Maybe it's build a website. Maybe it's,
yeah,
have a email list audience
yeah.
developed. Maybe it's just have the next book ready. It could be you're sort of like having to figure out what you got to do today. One, to get through today in a
Totally.
reasonable
Yeah.
manner, but two, like, what will you want to have done when that book comes out, let's
Hmm.
say. Or if you're not writing a book, the same principle applies. You kind of like think you got to figure out kind of what you got to do now to set yourself up for later.
Yeah.
But you don't have a couple of question marks about what's going to happen later, right?
Yeah. Yeah. So it feels like it feels like you have essentially two different timelines that you have to keep in mind all the time. And that's the immediate needs that you need to fulfill to keep the project you're currently working on moving forward, and the long-term needs, your long-term goals, which are the aims that you hope to have achieved in a year, 2 years, 3 years. And you have to figure out a way to balance both of those things and keep both moving forward in as best you can. And so when we talk about sort of planning the new year, and for whatever reason you've decided that you're going to start being a writer in 2022 magically, the sort of pieces of advice, I don't know if advice is the right word, but the sort of things that I always try to keep in mind or maintain when I'm working on things is that I try to set some internal deadlines for myself. I try to always have a backup project or a next project to work on when whatever project I'm working on goes as far as I can take it at that point. And I try to not get bogged down by the minutia or the short-term stuff, and make sure that it doesn't overwhelm me. I think it's easy to look at the grand scope of a project and find yourself stalling out if you don't continue to work on it regularly.
Sure. My rule of thumb I have, the way I've kind of simplified that idea a little bit is, and I started doing this a long time ago, but when I first had my first book accepted
Mhm.
for a public, so it was going to come out in 20. Well, I actually had a book accepted that didn't come out, but let's just simplify it. So when I have
Mhm.
a first book accepted, the Ex Machina, which came out in 2009, the rule that I had for myself was, I want to have my next book accepted before this book comes out.
Okay. Yeah.
And I've been pretty good over the years with keeping on that. So there's
Yeah.
been a couple of years it hasn't worked out, but I've been pretty. But that requires a couple of things, right? Like so, like
Yeah.
if I get a book accepted today and it's going to come out, fall 2022, that means like for you to have another book accepted by fall 2022, right? I
Yeah.
need to really
Yeah.
be deep into that project already. So it's so right now, like my book, quote unquote, coming out,
Mhm.
the way I'm thinking about my next book is
Mhm.
the Eye Collector trade.
Yeah.
So, I'm thinking of the collected trade as being my next book. So by the time that book comes out, I want to have another book accepted. So
Mhm.
in this scenario, it'll probably be the Eye Collector second trade.
Mhm.
Right. It's not going to be too complicated. But in a
Yeah.
different world, it might be one of the novel drafts I'm working on.
Mhm.
Uh, you
N-
know,
Now, the other thing that I find myself doing when it comes to maintaining a schedule is I jump around between projects depending on, um, it may sound ridiculous, but which project is currently getting funded, or which
yeah.
essentially follow the money, in terms of prioritizing which project I'm working on at a time. But I know from listening to your past podcasts and following your work that you have advocated before for only working on one project at a time and making sure to finish the project before you
Yeah.
start something new. And I just want to know how you feel about those two things sort of being in conflict with one another.
People giving you money, expecting things from you versus, working on one thing.
Yeah.
Well, it's only a problem if you're getting a lot of money, Lyndon, right?
All right. So it's not a problem then, is what you're saying.
So yes, all things being equal. So it's my rule of thumb is this is the rule I made. Again, I made a bunch of rules for myself to simplify things, because what I've found in my life, and I think this is probably true for a lot of people, but I'm a person who has a lot of, I can have a lot of anxiety and I can feel very overwhelmed very fast. Like that's sort of how my anxiety often manifests itself in the professional roles. I start to feel overwhelmed and I get paralyzed and I'm like, what should I do next? And I'll like, I'll have like 100 things I should do. What should I do next? So what I did is I created a couple simple rules to try to just make the decisions for me. I'm a big believer in outsourcing to like a rules and a system. If you just run a system, if you have a system and if you run the system, then the system will deliver results. And so when I feel overwhelmed, I try to remember my rules. I try to remember the system. So my rules are simple. The simplest rule in this concept is I have to work on the project that is the closest to being completed.
Okay.
So if there's a project that's, sometimes you're just gut feeling how close is this to being completed. And other times you got a list in front of you and you can see how close it is to being completed. My goal, the thing is like, well, forget about deadlines for a second. So my rule is if there's two projects in front of me, like two book manuscripts I'm working on, let's say, and one's 80% complete and one's 50% complete, I have to work on the one that's 80% complete or abandon it forever. So that's the rule. I have to work on the one that's closest to being done or quit working on it forever. And I've done that. I've taken projects and thrown them in the trash. I'll never go back to them. Presumably. Now, the modifier to that rule, though, is the only thing that will slot something sooner, like if my 50% project, I would maybe jump to working on that ahead of the 80% project if I get a deadline, an external deadline, like, so for example, someone's going to publish it and they need it by such and such a date, or I get money.
Yeah.
So if I get money, I'll jump from, I'm just going to use words instead. Like, let's say, so Canada right now, this novel I'm working on is about 80% finished. Okay. And the Eye Collector is about 50% finished. Well, actually, it's probably 40% now at this point. So I should be working on Canada, but I'll end up working on the Eye Collector because I got money. And once the money's, once I'm done that, then I'm back to Canada, unless I abandon it forever. Basically, is sort of, that's the way I have. I just have a rule. It's So it's better to just finish the thing that's closest to being finished. But if someone's paying you money, I'll make an exception. Like, if you're gonna give me $64,000, I'll make an exception. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I feel like it's a good problem to have.
Okay. So
but here's the real problem, Lyndon, just for 1 second though. Here's the real problem, because this is why I made the rule. What people will do is they won't work on the project that's closest to being finished. And they don't have a very good reason. Like, somebody's going to give them, $100,000. Or even $5,000. Instead, their reason is they just aren't feeling this project that's almost done. They want to work on something else. It's too bad. And that's the way I look at it, is like, I feel that way too. But what I say about it, and I think this is the mindset I advise people to have, because when you're a writer, you're your own boss in many respects. And it's dangerous to be your own boss, because either you can be too lax on your employee here, or you can be too harsh.
Yeah.
And so what I try to do is I don't think of myself as the boss of my writing career. The book is the boss. So Canada, if Canada is 80% complete, Canada is the boss. And I have to work on Canada even if I don't want to. The only, but if Canada gives me a break, if all of a sudden the Crow Murders gets some money.
Yeah. Okay. No, that all makes sense, and it actually plays into another factor that I think is really important when I think about forward progression in my work, and that's the concept of momentum, which is the longer I go without working on a project, the harder it is to get going on that project again.
Yep.
So I think it's very important if you're someone who's planning your year out ahead of you to maintain that momentum on something. If you have to switch projects, that's fine, but you should be working on something or trying to work on something very regularly, because the longer you go, the harder it's going to be. So to go back to your earlier question and answer it practically now, which is what am I doing with my time while I'm sitting out here in France? Currently, I'm working on a novel that I've been working on for far too long at this point. It's in the final stages, thankfully, and then it will be time to pitch it out and wait forever to hear back from someone. So that is going to be the project that I begin with at the beginning of the year. My aim is to start pitching out that book to agents and publishers. At the same time, Stephen, Call, and I have received some grant funding to work on a comic together. So under a grant deadline, we're going to be working on that. And that will go until February, at which time we'll hear back from the grant applications that we've already sent in September. And that may dictate what our next project is, depending on what gets funded. If none of that gets funded, then my plan is to work on another project that Stephen and I have been working on in the background for the last year, which is currently creator-owned comic called There Was Another Life. And we're going to truck along with that until it's finished. At the same time as all of this is happening, I have signed a publishing agreement for another book that hasn't yet been announced. And when my publisher is ready for us to really get going, and we're ready for we have our editor involved, it will be time to get to work on that project, because we'll have a publishing deadline. So that may cause Stephen and I's There Was Another Life project to get pushed further back because of the rule of having to follow sort of external deadlines. But the goal is to always have a project that I can fall back on when all of the other projects that I'm currently working on are held up for whatever reason, whether it's because they're in submission, or I'm waiting for an artist to complete the artwork for the scripts that I've written, etc. So barring all of those projects, there's a number of creator-owned projects that I have similar to that one that I would work on in the background. If it gets to a point where all of those comics are sort of out of my hands for a stage, my goal is going to be to start outlining another novel that I've already started to jot down notes for, and to start building a website for a personal business that I'd like to open sometime in the next 2 years.
So there's a couple of things in what you said. One thing I think is just worth noting to people that may not understand it otherwise is that Lyndon's talking about a number of comics projects in that mix.
Yes.
And so with a comics project, unlike a novel, it is very easy to be stuck where you can't do anything. Like you write the script, the artist now has the script, and you're waiting and you're waiting and you're waiting.
Yes.
Right. And art just takes longer. And so there's just going to literally be periods where you can't work on the book because there's nothing for you to do, but it's not done. So comics is a medium that kind of necessitates, in a way that a novel doesn't. It necessitates waiting and having like periods where you do kind of need a fallback project in many respects. The other thing, as I've moved into comics, I've kind of had to modify my rules a little bit. Where if I'm the holdup on a project, like if Gregory is waiting for me, or Steven's waiting for me,
To
I'll
prioritize it.
sometimes slot that ahead of other things that I
Yeah.
shouldn't otherwise slot it ahead of. But
Yeah.
because if the ball's in my court, we can't play ball anymore if I'm just sitting on the sidelines, right?
Yeah.
Whereas once it's out, I can kind of get back to normal business. The other thing that's just kind of in what you're saying is, I think is a good thing to point out. So you talk about building this website for something you're going to have to do like a couple of years from now, probably. That's what you're sort of thinking about. This is really salient to writing and having a writing career or any artistic career, where you kind of have this project that you're working on, and then like it's going to come out, down the line, so it's going to be like 2-3 years maybe till this project comes out. But you got to think about it now in terms of marketing it. Like it's too late. This is the thing that this is the mistake everybody makes with this kind of parallel universe way of thinking. You do have to kind of think about, like, imagine there's 2 universes and there's like a, Lyndon in each one. And in one universe, Lyndon's doing his everyday thing. The other universe, the book's already come out.
Yeah.
One universe you're working on the book, the other universe, the book's already come out. And you really have to be thinking about, like, okay, these 2 parallel universes are running side by side. What can I do in this universe, to help the other Lyndon out? And it's the biggest mistake everybody makes, and myself included in this, is thinking that they're going to wait till the book comes out to start marketing it.
It's too late then.
It's too late. It's it's just that's the wrong time. When that contract gets signed, you better have a marketing plan together next, if it's not already together. Because
I would say when the
is,
contract gets signed, that if you don't have your plan, that's when
now
you
you're
should
late.
start getting that marketing plan rolling, because at that point, you have a year, you have 2 years where you have to start building up to that launch. And once the book launches, you only have X number of months to really capitalize the most on that book's release.
You really only have a couple weeks to capitalize the most. And as you say, you got to keep going. But yes. And now I don't want to get into the weeds, like what makes a good marketing plan or any of that stuff right now. But just to kind of keep to the idea that you really have to kind of be thinking about and doing actual concrete things, like maybe have a website ready or whatever. Have some contacts, sorted out, get some research done. There's lots of concrete things you need to do, like early, so that it's in place in that later date. And you've got, if you just even think of it in terms of an audience, you need to have the audience now so that you will have it later. You can build the audience now so you have it later. It's easier to build an audience on the back of a book, but it doesn't help the book so much. In a manner of speaking. But
now, I have some. Go ahead.
Sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, I have some questions about being a creative running a business, and I don't want it to sort of dominate the conversation, because we've talked about being a creative and treating yourself like a business before on other episodes of the show. So I'll keep these points rather short. I'll try and keep them rather short. In asking you, you have an actual business that you've incorporated, as a creative, at what point do you think you go from treating yourself like a business to actually creating a business or incorporating a business for yourself? And in your opinion, what is the sort of abbreviated checklist of things that a creative needs to do to start a business, and not necessarily just be a business per se? So
that's a big question that I think probably requires another podcast, but I'll kind of like try to slot into this goal framework a little bit. So now what you're talking about referring specifically is that I have a legal corporation.
Yes.
Called Stranger Fiction. And So there's different ways to be a business as a writer. You can have a legal corporation, as I do, and operate inside of that corporation and own it, in this instance. You could also not be a legal corporation and just be a business. Like I'm also a business that called Martian Embassy Media. So I have a corporation called Stranger Fiction Inc. And then I am also a legal business called Martian Embassy Media. But that's what's called a sole proprietorship. And it's not, legally distinct from me in the same way. And then of course you can just be a dude doing stuff.
Yeah.
Right.
That's
And not a business so much.
Yeah.
Like in the sense that maybe you are effectively a sole proprietorship, but you don't have a name, you're not registered as a business and so on and so forth. Like I'm actually registered under those names and so on.
Yeah.
So it's a big question. I think maybe we might want to get into on another podcast, but just to plot in terms of goals for a second. I think what you need to really be clear on as early as possible. And of course, these things will change, but you need to think about like, what's my ultimate goal, as you say, like in that future world. So I have a number of ultimate goals that I just simply can't. So the reason I have a corporation in many ways, it's not because I need one, but because it will help. I realized, kind of looking at my goals, that the corporation will help me get to those goals. So there's things that a corporation can do that I can't do as an individual. One thing is that I need to be able to sink money into things. And the one thing that a corporation is taxed differently than an individual. So, I mean, don't take these numbers as facts, but like broadly speaking, you got something like, as a person, I'm taxed at around 40%. And as a corporation, I'm taxed around 9% or 10%. So there's about a 30% tax difference.
Yeah, that's not ridiculous at all.
But now, if I need all the money that I'm making, then there's no reason to have a corporation for tax reasons. Because, again, if I make money as a corporation, it's the corporation's money. Now I own the corporation, so the corporation can pay me that money. Once it pays me, now I'm taxed at 40% again.
Yeah.
In fact, I've been double taxed, 10 and then 40.
Yeah.
But if I don't need that money, right, or I don't need all of it at least, then there's the kind of that 30% wedge where it is the same if I get the money directly and then have to give it to the government, or if the corporation gets it and spends it. There's like 30% to kind of play with, where I'm making the same money, but there's like a 30% wiggle room, if that makes sense. Where like, I maybe can't personally have that money and do things, like I can't pay my mortgage with that money.
No, but
I could buy comics pages. Yeah, I could pay an artist. So like, there's a sort of, I needed that wiggle room. Like a lot of the projects I saw myself doing. So this is my alarm told me to get ready to go get the kids soon. A lot of the projects I saw myself kind of getting into, I realized that like I was going to need that wiggle room that would allow for more personal investment than I, frankly could afford to do individually, because I just didn't have the wiggle room as an individual, because all the money was going to taxes.
Yeah,
but
you
as
gain
a
an extra
corporation,
30% of your funding to pay people to do stuff.
Not exactly, but basically, right? Where like maybe I'm not really making more money, but I can spend a certain amount of money that maybe I couldn't otherwise. So that was, but then the other thing kind of connected to that is I just have realized more. Michael Hyatt is this business kind of guru guy that I really admire and pay attention to. The reason I like Michael Hyatt is because he wrote a book years ago called Platform. And it's a bit dated now, but and I don't agree with a number of things in the book. One thing he says in this book, the thing that caught my attention by Michael Hyatt was, he said in this Platform book, in the introduction, he used to be a CEO of one of the larger indie publishers in the US. And he writes in the introduction that writers would write to him asking questions. And one of them wrote with this question, which was, isn't it enough to write a good book anymore? Doesn't a good book stand on its own, or are writers doomed simply to be marketing machines? And
Yeah.
so Hyatt, in response, writes this: the answer to the first question is no. A good book does not stand on its own anymore. The answer to the second question is yes. You will have to be proactive if you want to have a writing career.
Yes.
And as soon as I read that, it was the opposite of everything that everybody else had been saying at that point. And then he was kind of, now it's a very normal thing to kind of say and to talk about needing a platform and so on. But this was something that was very, kind of mind blowing when he first was kind of getting into it. And I followed his stuff in really specific ways. And anyway, the reason one other thing he said that I latched onto and I really think is true, but he says somewhere something along the lines of, business people or writers really want to be lone wolves, and they really want to, I'm paraphrasing him, but he's like, they really want to be lone wolves. They really want to be, solopreneurs. They really want to be doing it all. And they really want to think of themselves as, having this drive and this desire to get to some, personal goal. He goes, but if you have a dream and your dream is big, is something you could accomplish by yourself, he goes, your dream's not big enough. He's like, the only way to really get at an ambitious, worthwhile dream that's going to matter and make a difference in the world is to assemble a team. He's like, one, because, you're going to drive yourself crazy and burn yourself out otherwise. Yeah. And two, because no person can do that much. No one's that smart. Yeah. No one's that good. And so I kind of realized that the other thing that kind of the corporation or the more of business-like structure, even though I'm not super corporate or super businessy, but I realized that structure, it allows for constructing a kind of infrastructure or lattice work of things and people, and kind of building almost a more formal network where one, I can kind of accomplish more ambitious things over time, but two, even just benefit the people that I'm working with more concretely and fully. So, it's just a different way of thinking about, again, I feel like one mistake I think writers make when they think about their goals is they're thinking so much about their personal goals. And I think that's fine, but I kind of really would like to encourage people to think more broadly about what goals do you have for your community around you? And how does your accomplishment maybe play a part in this broader thing, or how do you want to impact the culture around you, or impact the industry around you? I feel like writers should ask themselves how they want to change the publishing industry. Not that they have to, but that they should just be thinking about that a little bit more, thinking a little bit more fully about how do they want what they're doing to matter kind of beyond what they're doing. And so I don't think everyone needs to be a corporation or a business, but I would say if you have a sort of big enough goal or set of goals, and you kind of are in a position or maybe moving into a position where you don't need all the money you're making, then there's some really good reasons to kind of look more strictly at a corporate structure. But even more simply than that, I think any writer who wants to make a career needs to be a business. I think, formally speaking, one, you are anyway, whether you like it or not. But two, if you start to formalize it and make it and just be more thoughtful about it and think of yourself in that way, against your instincts, perhaps, you can actually do things much more intelligently. We were talking about a little bit, and I had brought up Michael Hyatt, and I want to just kind of return to this author, Michael Hyatt. So he's kind of moved into a space that I'm not super interested in, to be honest, lately. I'm not that keen in his newer work because it is a bit more focused on like leadership and business and so on. So, it's fine work if that's your thing. But what was more interested in him when he was just sort of serving a slightly different audience, and it was more an audience of writers and, primarily nonfiction writers, but a lot of the stuff he had to say was still kind of relevant for fiction writers. And he started to kind of move into more of a kind of life planning, leadership, businessy space, where I think, he's still an interesting, valuable author, but he just kind of speaks to me a little less fully. But in the sort of transition, he did two things that really were interesting to me. So one is he created a kind of productivity system that I endorse and try to use. When I use it well, my life is good. And when I don't use it well, my life is not good. And so I really do endorse his system, which is called Free to Focus. And he details it in a book of that title. But that's a little beside the point. He also did a book that kind of is more focused on what we're talking about, which is sort of planning in a manner of speaking. He's done two books on planning. But the one that is kind of most relevant to this discussion here, and the thing I want to kind of just bring up in terms of goals, like thinking about goals and goal setting, is Michael Hyatt did a book called Your Best Year Ever. It's got kind of a schlocky title, but it kind of details his sort of way of thinking about goals and goal setting. And what I like about it is he takes this sort of well-worn idea. So this is kind of an acronym you might have heard, which is, people should make SMART goals. And SMART is a particular acronym. This is a lot of people talk about this. They say your goals should be specific, they should be measurable, they should be actionable, they should be realistic, and they should be time keyed, have specific times. But I like what Hyatt does compared to other people is he expands the acronym and he changed it. And he says, your goals should not be smart, but smarter. So this is his clever little, business wrinkle, making it proprietary, right? Yeah. But also, what I like how he does this kind of expansion. So what he says is like, yes, your goals should be specific in the sense that they should be, precisely worded. So you should be able to know the way he, like, again, you get some wording that's precise and clear when you write them down. Two, they should be measurable. So again, this is the kind of standard wisdom. Measurable in a sense that you can, the very clear way to think about it is you should be able to know when you've accomplished the goal. Like there should be a thing that you can measure. Like if your goal is to, lose weight, well, it should be lose 5 pounds. Or if you're trying to put on weight, it should be gain 5 pounds. Like it should be something where you're trying to measure it, and it's clear when you pass the benchmark. If it's trying to, I want to write more. What does write more mean? Right? Like I want to write for 1 hour a day or 1 page a day or whatever it is. Yeah. So it's just something where there's no ambiguity. And this kind of ties into the specificity idea. It's clear when you've accomplished the goal or that you failed to accomplish the goal yet. He similarly says, your goal should be actionable. You should be able to do something about them, in other words. So getting your book published is a perfect example of a goal that is not good in classic, sense of goal setting because
you can't control it.
You can't control it unless you're going to publish the book yourself, which you could do, I guess. But assuming you want to go the traditional publishing route, you can't control whether your book is published. So your goal should be related to things you can control, like sending out so many submissions. I want to, again, make it measurable. So I want to send out, 1 submission a week until my book is accepted for publication, whatever. The R he changes, and I like what he does here. He's the conventional wisdom of a goal setting is, these quote unquote SMART goals, they should be realistic. What he does away with that idea. And he says your goal should be risky. In other words, you should not be sure that you could actually accomplish this thing. So you don't want to be delusional. You don't want to be setting a goal that's so like large or big that like it kind of is ridiculous. You're never going to, compete in the NBA, perhaps, unless that's your thing. But like, like as a writer, he says, you want a goal that is not just realistic, but is risky, like something you could, isn't easy. It's not outside of the realm of possibility, but it is kind of on that edge.
Yeah, the term is slightly out of reach.
Yeah, and his argumentation here is that you need something that's ambitious enough to be motivating. So like if it were to be true, it would be, a thing that you'd really have to work towards. You really have to strive towards. And there's a couple sides to that. One is that, it needs to be kind of tough enough to really challenge you, and risky enough to kind of stretch your thinking. But also you need to like really have to be aware that to accomplish this thing, you're going to have to let other things fall away. And a risky goal kind of puts you in that position. Is something where you really have to, as you're articulating it to yourself, you should be aware that you should kind of frame it or push it to the point where it's going to make other things in your life fall away, because that's going to kind of get you closer in the real world to those bigger and bigger goals. Okay. He keeps the T, like the time key. It should be, do it by such a date or whatever. A lot of people like to do annual goals, but he will advise not to have too many goals. One, less than 10 is his advice. As few as possible, less than 10. And he'll say, and you don't want them all to do it at the same time. Like a lot of people will, if they decide to do annual goals, for example, they'll often like decide, well, they're all due on December 31st. To that, you know what I mean? And he like advises against that. If at all possible, try to break it up so that you're not, so that you can just like focus on, if you got like 7 goals, you can focus on only like 2 or 3 at a time and still be kind of meeting, benchmarks. And then where he goes further with it, with the E and the R in the acronym, is he says, you really want a goal that's exciting. That's sort of the E in smarter. You want something that kind of excites you. People, he talks about business a lot because he's kind of more speaking to business people. He says, like, a lot of business people will say, like, oh, we want to get sales up 5%. He's like, well, that's not exciting. He's like, even for a salesman, like, what is 2%, isn't exciting. It's like maybe, 100%, 50%. He's like, if it's, risky and not totally unrealistic, he goes, but more to the point though, is there not some like exciting aspect of what you're doing? I want to, change someone's life rather than just like increase my sales 2%.
Yeah. I mean, even Apple can get their sales up 5% in a year. Like, you're smaller fish. You could definitely do better than that.
And even if that's a big deal, even if that's massive, is going to make a huge difference in your life. Like, what's exciting about it? Like, you gotta like on a day-to-day basis, you gotta think about, you gotta frame it in terms of the motivation. And his point being that what's going to happen at some point is you're going to want to give up on this goal, no matter what it is.
So what's R?
So R is relevant. It should be relevant to your stage of life. So, for example, some people will make goals that just aren't relevant to their life. Like, it's too much because they have small kids, or it's too small because now they got all this free time, or like they're making a goal for something, like they want to hit the bestseller list, but they haven't even written a book yet.
Okay, so let's take the framework then that we've been talking about, and a lot of the points that we discussed earlier, and let's try and apply this then to the question that we first set out to ask, which is, as a writer starting the new year, how can you apply all of this advice and create a plan for yourself for the next 12 months? And let's assume that someone has, let's say that they've finished or they're near completion of the first draft of a book that they'd like to get traditionally published. And, finishing a first draft is a notable accomplishment in itself because you actually finished something, but let's call that the starting point of where someone can plan their next year going forward. Where do you think they should start?
I would really start with his sort of that E that he adds on. Like, what's exciting about this thing that you're thinking about. So if you're working on a book, let's say you're nearing the end of the
Mhm.
manuscript draft, let's say,
Yeah.
I would really want to question like what is exciting about that. And it may seem obvious, like, and finishing the manuscript, maybe I've never finished a manuscript before. Okay, fine.
Mhm.
And as you say, that's a great accomplishment, generally
Mhm.
speaking, but like, what's exciting about it for you? Why do you want to write this book?
Mhm.
Um, Often I find people don't think enough about those questions. Like
Mhm.
they've got that they want to write a book and the book is an end in itself. And that's fine and good. But often I feel like people either aren't aware of or don't think enough about their actual motivations for wanting to write a book,
Mhm.
if that makes sense. And I would really
Mhm.
just sort of start with like getting clear on like, why do you want to write this book? Like what's important about this book to you?
Mhm.
Because what's going to happen is, especially after you finish the manuscript and you move into this editing process, which a lot of writers don't like, frankly. I love the
Mhm.
editing process, but a lot of writers don't like it
I'm
because it
struggling through
isn't the
mine.
same. You're struggling with yours. So, I
Yeah.
mean, let me just, what I would
Yeah,
say to
continue, please.
you, when what would help you when you're struggling on it is to be very clear in your mind why you're doing it, so that when you're struggling,
Mhm.
you can go back. And I would literally like write this down. You can go again. This is something of the Hyatt method that I'm advising here. He would say, you clarify this goal early on, clarify all the aspects of it, write them all out, and then look at it all the time and remind yourself,
Mhm.
especially like when you hit a wall or you just are stuck, or
Mhm.
you're struggling in the completion of it.
Yeah.
Literally go back to the drawing board and remind yourself, like, why is this exciting to you? Because it's easy to forget,
Yeah.
like, what matters here. And that's not going to fix the problem necessarily in and of itself, but I think a really important step that's going to matter down the line when you're struggling, and especially was helpful to get figured out early on, is like what actually excites you about the thing you're doing, and like if it
Mhm.
was done, what would it mean to you?
Mhm.
So kind of visioning it out in that sense. So I would ask you this question: why do you want to write that book?